There was the question recently that was asked by a student from a Buddhist monk. The student was a layperson, and the Buddhist monk was Mahatera. Heard the student ask about their dilemma in keeping precepts, a dilemma in the sense that they did not truly understand whether there is any significance to, let's say, a negative mental thought, whether it's thinking of saying something bad or doing something bad. Saying something bad or doing something bad. Because in comparison to those, what was the value? Is there a value to the thought? The negative thought? And to my surprise, the Mahatera turned to them and said, in a very nonchalant way, how it is absolutely not important, the mental thought, the mental action basically. It was the physical, the bodily action, or the verbal action that is most important. And moved on to the next question. The next student, rather. That was done. I was quite surprised because that is an utter misrepresentation of Lord Buddha's Dhamma. I was surprised and I was also saddened by that because that's not Dhamma. Why? Because we have countless examples of Jains, the followers of NIkāyas, coming over, the Mahavir followers, at the time of the Buddha, coming over trying to argue or debate with him or just to find out what the Buddha's position is in regards to the importance that he gives to physical action or mental action. There's in fact a sutta, I believe it's sutta number 56 of the Majjhima Nikāya, it's called Pāli Suttas. This is not the Pāli who was the expert Bhikkhu on the Vinaya. This is Pāli. This Pāli was a follower of Mahavira, Nikāyas, a contemporary of the Buddha, who was one of the Tirthankaras, or the, their enlightened, awakened beings of that tradition, of the Jain tradition, who was claiming, as they still do in Jainism, that it is the person's actions that matters. None of the others matter. In fact, you can only make karma with physical action. And there's an interesting dialogue that goes on. I mean, there's more and more examples. You also have them in the Anguttara Nikāya, you have them in the Samyutta Nikāya, where this subject comes up. And in fact, the Buddha there are countless suttas where the Buddha goes over all three aspects of action: mental action, verbal action, and physical, bodily action. And yes, one might look at the contextual role that the significance might be of either of these three. However, essentially, they all carry weight. So, the intention, the thought, we say the thought is what is behind the kamma, right? Not the physical action. So by shrugging it, by completely brushing it aside and saying, no, it's the physical action, we're making a major mistake in interpreting the Dhamma. You cannot do that and call yourself practicing the Dhamma or even understanding the Dhamma. Because absolutely, the Buddha mentions clearly, this instructs us to place tremendous value on the importance of mental action. After all, what is right view? What is, after sammaditi, what is samma sankappa? What is that? Right thought or right intention, however you want to interpret it, but it is involving the mental action. So we need to be very careful. However, the student just accepted this. And I was watching this very briefly, a commentary that this one particular teacher was giving, and at the end there was a Q&A. That's where I heard this question. I was, interestingly enough, as I played this video, I played it right at that point where this student, this adult student was asking this teacher this question, and that just like, wow. That is why I wanted to address this and mentioned it to you earlier. How we need to be very careful not to just blindly go ahead and accept what teacher is giving us. Also in the Anguttara Nikāya, in the section on sources, the great sources that the Buddha talks about, in the Book of Fours, some translators have translated as the great references. Either way, it's the same thing. And the references or the sources being the suttas and the Vinaya. For the student, not just to pick up, not just to blindly accept whatever I'm giving or any other bhikkhu is giving as an answer, but to go ahead and compare it to the suttas or the Vinaya. And then to see if this is truly the word of the Buddha. And obviously this Mahathera's words were not the words of the Buddha, not the teaching of the Buddha. Because this is very dangerous. After all actions that are studied, that are carefully thought out, are mental actions to begin with. So simply because it's just an intention, because sometimes some teachers explain it, well, it's just a thought, so you never acted it out. Well, wait a minute. That is putting the mind in a certain mood, in a certain state of responsiveness. After all, how many times have we've heard the phrase or the sentence, whatever we think about, that becomes our reality. What? Whatever we think about, whatever we ponder upon, that is what we eventually act out physically, verbally and physically. What are papanchas? Proliferations. These are mental conjurings that take place. Whatever's churning inside the mind. It might not manifest now, but it is still making a huge impact. The actions, the physical actions might be saying one thing, but I care about the intentionality. because sooner or later it's going to show within the behavior of the person. This is important because there are so many people, in the case of, for example, recluses or bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. A person, for example, might on the surface look like they are doing the training proper, meaning they're following the precepts on the surface. For all intents and purposes, nothing's being done. No breaking of any precept, or none of the Vinaya rules are being broken on the surface, as it appears to be. Meanwhile, the person might actually be imagining things, thinking about possibilities, vulgar possibilities, saying certain things to someone that if they had otherwise gone out and just allowed it to be spoken, but they would never dare to. But they're thinking about it, thinking that it is actually safer. Well, guess what? That tendency immediately separates such a person from an arahant or any of the other noble disciples. Why? Because a person who is a noble disciple is a person who is living the adhisila, the higher sila, the higher training, not just following the Vinaya. They're just superficial when you come to think about them, when you look at them, if they're being kept on the observable level. This is very important. When teachers are coming out and misguiding students, misguiding, why? Because they are misrepresenting the Dhamma. That doesn't mean that the physical bodily action is not or is less important. No. That is also important. But one must be careful not to turn a blind eye on the mental activity. The Buddha spent countless hours explaining this. So our ignorance does not justify our audacity to come out and misrepresent Lord Buddha's Dhamma. That's unacceptable. That's unforgivable in my book. It's blamable, highly blamable. And that is breaking a precept for me. That is breaking the Vinaya for me. Not some rule, minor rule or this or that. Not even eating once a day. That rule. Or touching the hand of a woman. Not even that for a bhikkhu, I would say. The intentions we have in our hearts are extremely important. You know, as lay disciples, you guys have the 5 precepts. The 5th of which is Musavada. Musavada Vedamani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Musavada. And as you know, obviously it has its 4 branches, primary branches, which is not just to speak what is falsehood, but also not to gossip, not to use harsh or vulgar speech, and not to engage in idle chatter, frivolous speech. Yes. But in essence, if we go back to the not speaking falsehood part, I see a direct correlation with the other thing that we commonly encourage people to bring into their lives, into their character, meaning to say what they really mean, what they're thinking, to be authentic. To be authentic. Otherwise, you're just lying. And this is another thing that I have seen within bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. There's a smile. There's appropriate greeting. But then there's a lot of the opposite going on. Whether in front of each other or behind closed doors. That's lying. That's lying. To me, it's extremely important. I don't care if you're practicing only the 5 precepts. I can't even use the word only there to distinguish it as, well, you only practice the 5 precepts because you are the upasakas and upasikas, the laity, versus us. I'm a bhikkhu. I'm supposed to practice 227, actually 220 plus the 7 disciplinary rules. How to execute them, how to judge, etc. But I cannot show off the 220. That's not a competition. Because you, as a lay disciple, as a lay person, only taking the 5, but you adhere to them with your heart, with your mind, totally dedicating yourself to that. To me, that is much higher than a bhikkhu who even does the uposhata, who even does the patimokkha, knows it by heart, in Pāli, to recite it in Pāli, in record time, like an hour or so. To me, you, the lay disciple, who practices only the 5, compared to a bhikkhu, somebody in robes, who does not even practice one portion of it, doesn't have their right mind in approaching the Vinaya. Because you're also practicing the Vinaya. It's not just Panchasila, because everything is there. Everything is there in those 5. So please do not look down upon the Panchasila and think of it as less than what I, as a bhikkhu, am practicing and training in constantly. And this brings me to the other thing which I heard you mention yesterday about a certain other bhikkhu, in fact, a certain Ajahn from the Thai forest tradition, when a student was asking, a lay student, and from what I gather, you mentioned something about the teacher turning to the student, who happens to be a lay disciple, and saying that if the student wants to liberate oneself, then they have to become a monk. That is nonsense. That's a nonsensical statement. Why? Because at the time of the Buddha, the number of people who were awakened in any of the, especially the 3 stages of awakening, far outnumbered the number of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, those in robes. The number of laity who had attained, who had seen, who had the vision, the eye of Dhamma, they had knowledge and vision. They were Sotapanna, Sakadagami, and Anagami laity. They weren't in robes of a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. So there is this continued misconception, which unfortunately doesn't stay as mere misconception, because these are harmful to the Dhamma. And what do I mean by that? If I am that layperson who is so devotedly practicing sila, practicing samadhi, and gaining insights, going through the jhanas, then that person, that lay person, is going to start doubting oneself because of an unwise statement made by a bhikkhu. It is unwise. The Buddha would never say such a foolish thing. Yet we have bhikkhus, some of them are mahatheras. I remember years ago, there was one of my ex-teachers, he passed away some years ago, but he used to vehemently state in his lectures that a layperson cannot attain Sotapanna stage. And I told him, Bhante, what about Anathapindika? What about Visakha? What about Chitta? Chitta was an anagami, householder. Visakha was the number one female benefactor, the donor of the Buddha. Anathapindika was the male, par excellence, donor. You have countless individuals, lay people. And today you have bhikkhus and bhikkhunis who cannot even reach the first stage of awakening. What do you say to that? What do I say to that as a bhikkhu? A bhikkhu who's claiming that, well, in order for you, the layperson, to reach these levels of awakening, you first must give up your family, give up your life, give up your work, give up everything, and that, well, that is very irresponsible of me to say such a thing then. Because there's no ground for it. There's no precedent for it. These are delusional statements made by uneducated, unwise, and definitely unenlightened, unawakened teachers. Because an awakened mind would never say such an unwise statement. And even possibly, unfortunately, mislead the student, who might even give up practicing sila, give up practicing bhavana or samadhi, and give up, therefore, ever having more insights. I broke the connection for this person. So we must exercise extreme caution, both as bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, and especially as lay people. And simply not look at this Ajahn or Bhikkhu or Bhante or Sayadaw as the one with the last word. No. Do not believe anything I'm saying until it resonates with you, and then that's not enough even. Go to the suttas. If I'm saying Book of the Fours, go check in the Anguttara Nikāya, go check in the Anguttara Nikāya. If I'm saying Buddha mentions clearly, states it unequivocally, the importance of mental activity, puts it on the same level, if not even more, higher level than physical action, and it's in the Pāli Sutta, for example. That's the only one that I thought of right now. There's several of them, actually. Then go check. That's what the Buddha wanted us to do, and not to listen to this Mahathera or that Thera or that Ajahn or that Sayadaw or this Bhante. This is your life. Who cares what I'm saying? This is your life. And it's up to you to save yourself. And any self-respecting, wise bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, our job is to clean up the road for these people, for our students, who come and put their faith in us, in our knowledge, in our practice. Relying that, hey, this person has dedicated their life. Look at them, they're in robes, so they definitely are reliable. They're the source. The Buddha would disagree. I'm a bhikkhu. I am in robes. My job is to protect the Dhamma. But the way I have to check, I have to recheck whether I'm misrepresenting Lord Buddha's teachings or not. But ultimately, the last word belongs to you, the listener. See if it makes sense to you in your heart. See if you feel it viscerally, whether there's some truth there that resonates with you. And then check. Please check. Because your life, your future, your liberation depends on it. You ending of suffering depends on it. Why would you want to go roam around samsara and end up being butchered? No one can guarantee that you will never come back as a cow, as an animal, as an insect. So long as you're roaming around. No one can guarantee that you will always be a human being if you just follow your 5 precepts. There's a set of procedures that need to be taken into account. My wish, my fervent wish is for each of you to reach at the very least a sotapanna, where you yourself will know the eye of Dhamma that opens up. You will know that there's no more lower rebirth for you. So I have to make sure that I do my very, very best to connect you with the Buddha's teaching in a way where you still have access to the words of the Buddha and not become susceptible to some interpretation that is based on wrong view, that is misrepresenting Lord Buddha's teachings. Whether it is coming from somebody in robes, as a Buddhist monk or a nun, or not. So I will stop here.